From 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, I just had amnesia every day. I would call it a great summer romance, except that it takes place in winter, so it's a great romance to read in summer if you don't mind winter in your books. I don't know why I'm complaining, but I am. Wow. Let's do that again. I woke up with the weirdest song stuck in my head this morning. It's Dark Side by Kelly Clarkson, and I haven't listened to that song in years, but it's like a great song. I'm kind of sad that it didn't get more hype, more love. It's like deep and thought-provoking. Anyway, that's not at all what we're here to talk about. Today I am feeling... Wow. Let's do that again. Today I am filming my February wrap-up. So these are all the books that I read in the month of February. Let's get to it. The first one... Well, not the first one that I finished, but the first one that I'm going to talk about is A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is the prequel to The Hunger Games, so I guess it's 0.5 if you're listing it by numbers. And this follows Coriolanus Snow, which his name, first of all, is very interesting. I don't know what I'm trying to say every time I think about that word, Coriolanus, and I listened to the audiobook, so that really helped. But, like, it took me a long time for my brain to wrap itself around the sound of that word. I don't know why. Also, interestingly enough, Shakespeare has an entire play called Coriolanus, and it's a tragedy. And I don't think it was an accident that she picked Coriolanus as the tragic character in her story. But I don't know what the Shakespeare play about Coriolanus is really about. I just know that he has one. So I'm sure there's more of a connection there that's going right over my head. Anyway, this follows Coriolanus Snow as he is picked as a mentor for the 10th Hunger Games, I believe is the 10th Hunger Games. I read it and I don't even remember. But he gets assigned to the girl from District 12, and he has to do everything possible to make sure he wins. And by he wins, I mean she wins, to avoid losing a chance at a scholarship because his family's in a really hard situation financially, and he needs the money of a scholarship to be able to go to school. And also to keep his family's rundown penthouse that they have like a couple rooms perfectly preserved so that they can bring company to those rooms, and the rest of the house is kind of like destitute. I gave this book a solid 2.5 stars. I enjoyed it. I did not enjoy it as much as I enjoyed the original trilogy, though. I'll say this for Suzanne Collins. Every single one of her books has a Hunger Games, and it's a trope that she uses. And I don't know why I was surprised when all of a sudden we were in a Hunger Games scenario again, because I literally saw that in the description. But I almost am disappointed that she always resorts back to writing about a Hunger Games scenario, and she does it fairly well. But it's kind of old. And I'm a little bit disappointed that it turned out to that. However, this time was a little bit different just because we saw it from the mentor's perspective. So watching it from the camera's perspective was really interesting, and it brought a new twist to that, which I feel like would have been great, in the second book. I don't know. I feel like that's one of the reasons why the movies were so interesting to me, is because we saw things from outside the Hunger Games, and we saw how it affected people who were creating the games and the game makers, and I thought that was really interesting because we saw a more rounded perspective. Anyway, but this book also moves beyond the Hunger Games, so it takes place, you see beyond what happens in the arena, and then the characters continue to go on for about a third more of the book, half more of the book. So I thought that was great. Like, I think she does really well outside of the Hunger Games arena as well, and I think that she should totally expand beyond that. And I would totally read something by her. I'm just a little tired of the Hunger Games trope, which is sad because I loved the Hunger Games. Like, I don't know why I'm complaining, but I am. So I don't have issues with how Coriolanus turned out to be a villain. This is a tragedy, so we watch a character move from moderate humanity to the dregs of humanity. And I didn't have any problems with that. I thought it was a pretty subtle series of shifts, and I didn't have any problems with that. It's reminded me a little bit of reading about Tom Riddle and Harry Potter, where you kind of like watch the movement and the progression. So if you don't like that, you may not like if you don't like Harry Potter number 6, you may not like this book, watching somebody move down the scale of humanity. But you may just not like tragedies in general. My issues arise from the fact that there are a lot of plot conveniences that she wrote for herself into this book. The last 1/3 of the book gets really cheesy, almost to the point of being unbearable. So if you don't want to know anything about this book, skip ahead because I'm about to do some spoilers. But the spoilers I'm talking about aren't going to affect the main plot of the story. So we just happened to find out that the song The Hanging Tree is written by Lucy Gray Bard. Lucy Gray Bard. See, I listened to it, but I still can't remember how to say it. Lucy Gray Bard. And she is the girl that Coriolanus mentors in the Hunger Games. And she just happens to write the song The Hanging Tree, which, like, how convenient is that? It's supposed to have the effect that you're like, wow, this girl that Coriolanus knew, all of a sudden she's the one that wrote the Hanging Tree song, and then later on Katniss and everybody uses that as the main propaganda. How horrible for him. That's just really convenient. And then he also happens to really hate Mockingjays because he ends up in District 12 for a little bit. And he loves the Jabberjays because they can be controlled. They're great. They're not creepy. But the Mockingjay, like, he just despises the Mockingjay. Like, right off the bat, he hates them almost on sight. And, like, how convenient that, like, he hates this bird on sight. And then the rebellion picks that bird, just happens to pick that bird as a symbol of things that he hates. And it's just real convenient. And it comes across as cheesy convenient, actually. And I think the problem that I had with that is because she took a very blatant opportunity to set up the Hunger Games series in a way that kind of just rubs me the wrong way. And it's just hard to do a prequel because you as the author are coming forward and saying, this is how it really happened, when you've already released a set of books and given people time to come up with a story in their head of how it happens. And I feel like once you as an author release your story into the world, you no longer have complete and total ownership over it anymore because now you're allowing people to do the work that you have assigned them to do in a way. Like, we come up with the story of what happened before District 12 when we meet Katniss. And when you come in and say, no, it actually happened this way, it feels like you're denying us our ability to enjoy the books on some extent, to some level. It's the J.K. Rowling problem where she spends a lot of time talking about, no, it actually happened this way, and she's trying to pin down every single thing that happened, and it doesn't allow you as a reader to really come up with the things yourself. And I feel like that gets problematic and sticky because technically the author should have control of the work, but that's not how I believe writing works. I believe that once you release it into the world, it is a joint project now between you and your audience. And therefore, prequels are very sticky just for that reason. Don't get me wrong, this is nowhere near as heavy-handed as J.K. Rowling sometimes is. But there's a lot of little details that she threw in there that just smell wrong. And if you don't have a problem with the author saying, no, I think it actually happened this way, and you're willing to, like, reimagine that world, then that won't be a problem to you. But if you do have a problem with that and you feel like the author is telling you that you're wrong, then you may not like this book. Okay. The next book I'm going to talk about is American Royals by Katharine McGee. This story follows 4 perspectives from 4 females, and it plays on the idea of what if America had a royal family and the Gilded Age of monarchs had not come to a close yet. And it's so sweet. This is one of those books that it's just a fun read, and I would call it a great summer romance, except that it takes place in winter, so it's a great romance to read in summer if you don't mind winter in your books. Anyway, we follow Princess Beatrice, whose parents have asked her to pick out a husband from a select group of people. And she's always tried really hard to follow her duty for her country, and she's trying really hard to do this, and she just does not love the guy that she picks because she's already in love with someone else. And then we follow her sister, who considers herself the spare princess, and she is usually fine. She doesn't want anything to do with the monarchy, and then the only boy that she really wants is the one boy that's off limits to her. And then we also follow the brother, but we don't get the brother's perspective. We get the 2 girls who are trying to be his girlfriend and win him over. We get their perspectives, and it's super, super interesting. The author wrote it wisely in 3rd person, so it works really well from that. And you see inside everybody's head, and the author does it very naturally so that you see all of the motivations. Sometimes the motivations are a little bit cliche, I will say that, but nobody comes across as a complete and utter villain or a complete and utter saint, which I really like. It's as morally gray as a fluffy romance can get. I think I gave this a 4 stars. This definitely would have been a 5-star read for me if I'd read it like maybe 2 years ago. I think I'm tired of the YA genre, and maybe that's why I'm giving it 4 stars, or maybe it's because the issues that are being brought up are no longer applicable to me, because I'm not in the midst of trying to figure out if I'm in love with somebody or not, because totally am. Love you, babe. And it also plays just a little bit into the trope of miscommunication. Not so much that you hate it, at least I didn't. Also, the trope of miscommunication doesn't bother me as much as I know that it bothers some people. But with that being said, I did enjoy this novel a lot, and I will definitely reread it, and I would probably buy it if I found it somewhere. But that all being said, there is nothing in this novel that is new. It's all just a really well-packaged version of what is already on the YA shelves. Okay, the next book we have is The Cousins by Karen M. McManus. I'm a sucker for Karen M. McManus, and basically anything she writes I will read, just because I had such a lovely experience reading One of Us is Lying. The thing is, none of her books I feel like have been as good as that one. So that's kind of a bummer. But that one was just really good. So this story follows 3 cousins who have, well, let's back up. This story follows the Story family, and the mother disinherits her 5 children. They don't get any notice or any reason about why they've been disinherited, just a letter that says you know what you did. And then all contact with their mother has been cut off. So moving down a generation, we now have 3 grandchildren for this family. My brain totally blanked on the word there. And 15 years later, her 3 grandchildren receive letters from their grandmother saying, please come and work at my resort for the summer. Now, this book was really well crafted. The characters are super believable. They stick out in my mind. I really enjoyed reading the character perspectives. It's written in first person, which with a toss-in of third person from history 15 years ago, which I thought was a really interesting choice. I really enjoyed that. I gave this book a 3.75 stars. I had trouble following the mystery aspect of it. All of the clues were there, but I didn't piece them together because I felt like they were really subtle, which may not be a problem of the book. It may be a problem that I just didn't pick up on it. And my enjoyment of mystery novels is directly dependent on how well I can piece together the novel. So if I'm just not clever enough for a novel, I may possibly decide I don't like it as much. So I think I would need to reread it again. I don't know. I feel like this one and then the Two Can Keep a Secret by Karen M. McManus. Karen M. McManus. Let's try that again. Both of those, the clues were really subtle, and so I didn't pick up on them, which, you know, if it's a mystery that has been unsolved for more than like 10, 15 years, it's probably because the clues are really subtle. So I think it's more a matter of me being like, well, I couldn't solve it right off the bat, so I don't like it. Me. I think it's more a matter of that, and I don't think that's fair. So I think upon a reread, once I kind of know where it's going, I probably would like this novel a lot better. So I would definitely reread this novel, and I would definitely recommend it. But I think one of the reasons I loved One of Us is Lying is because I solved it before the reveal happened. So, but also I listened to it like a lot more intently than I listened to this one. This one I was just kind of absorbing in the background, and I really wasn't spending a whole lot of time paying attention to the details. So we're going to blame this on reader error, and we'll read it again and maybe see what the score is. Okay, the next book is Where the Crawdads Sing by Dehlia Owens. This story follows the mysterious marsh girl in a small fishing village in the United States set in the 1960s and 70s. She lives barefoot and wild, and she's just in the marshes And she is a product of profound isolation in her circumstances because her family abandons her. She lives a pretty withdrawn life from society. She doesn't know how to be, she doesn't know how to talk to people. She doesn't know what to do with them. And when the popular quarterback, who was the quarterback, grows up, his name is Jason Andrews, when he's found dead in the marsh, everybody kind of looks at the marsh girl and assumes that she had something to do with it. This is a coming-of-age story, and it's, like, I would describe this book as a marriage between the book Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott Odell and To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, because you have the profound... you have the sweetness and beautifulness of a girl figuring out how to survive on her own, like the Island of the Blue Dolphins, and then you also have the small town court trial going on in To Kill a Mockingbird, and that sounds like a really awkward mix, but it's done really beautifully. And I never thought that I would think of a marsh as a romantic place, because normally you think marsh and you think swamp, but like the very first line talks about how a swamp and a marsh are different. And I actually I enjoyed the writing of this. It was beautiful, but it was really beautiful in a very subtle way. And it handles the topics of child abandonment, isolation, prejudice, and rape. So trigger warnings for rape in the last 1/3 of the book. I give this book a 4 stars. I liked how much it made me think. It felt very familiar to me in the sense that, because it felt like Island of the Blue Dolphins and To Kill a Mockingbird, but it also felt very strange and different at the same time, which is the perfect marriage of a book that you want to sell, right? You want to be like, it's like these, but different. It's a great marketing strategy. So I think that it really did that really well. I have had some time to think about the ending, because the ending is a huge kind of cliffhanger. You learn something really important about the characters at the very end. It changes how you view the entire book. And I love books like that. Like, I love the idea that when you finish something, all of a sudden you see where you started very differently. And it leaves us with some very morally great characters. And wrestling with that is a little bit difficult. And I would probably reread this book. I'm not going to say that it's my favorite. But I've thought about it a lot since finishing it, and I kind of agree with the choices of the main character, and I don't know how I feel about that, because I don't think that I don't condone the choices that she made. Oh, this is an adult novel, and it deals with adult subjects, so heads up on that. The next 2 books I'm going to talk about kind of in tandem, because the problems that they had and the things that were good about them are both very similar. So we have Wildfire and The Lion's Game by Nelson DeMillie. Wildfire is the 4th book in Nelson DeMillie's series on John Corey, and this story follows John Corey, who is a former homicide detective for the New York police officers, and he's now joined the Anti-Terrorist League. Dang it. Anti-Terrorist Task Force. ATTF? It's not a real thing, but it sounds very official. I think it's ATTF. And in this story, one of his fellow agents goes on a very routine surveillance mission and winds up dead. And it's outside of this prestigious country club, and John Corey kind of digs into it with his wife Kate, and they start to suspect foul play, and the more they dig into it, the more it's revealed that somebody's trying to get revenge for what happened on 9/11. This is a really fascinating book. And in tandem, The Lion's Game by Nelson DeMillie is the 2nd book in the John Corey series, because I like to read books out of order. These stories don't have to be read in order. My sister-in-law gave me the 4th book, and I picked up the 2nd book. So that's kind of why I'm reading them out of order, because I didn't have access to them in order. Anyway, so The Lion's Game follows John Corey again, and he is on his way to the airport to pick up a Libyan terrorist who has turned himself into the United States for custody. And when the plane arrives, you realize something very chilling and terrible has happened, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, because part of learning what that is makes up the novel. But you realize that the lion, the Libyan terrorist, is on the loose, and it's great. So these books, I give them both 3.5 stars. I have not read a whole ton from the action, suspense, thriller, mystery genre, however you package that. These books for me were a just really fun time. So between both of these books, I read about 1,700 pages easy, just breezed through that late at night. Spent way too much time reading late at night, and I've been super tired because of it. And I have no idea how much time I spent reading these books, and I kind of don't care because I just loved the ride. Did these books change my life? No. It's not like anything in these books changed my life, but because I enjoyed them so much, I'm going to definitely make it a priority to read more books like this. So in that way, yes, they did change my life. So it's a very weird... I think I've definitely discovered another genre that I love, and I've primarily spent most of my time reading YA for the last 2 years, and I do love the genre of YA, but also I love mystery, suspense, thriller. Like, that's when I first started reading when I was in 3rd grade, 4th grade. I primarily read Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. Like, I read a lot of mysteries. So part of the appeal of these books was that it was almost like coming home to be like, oh, I love mystery novels, and I'd forgotten how much I love mystery novels. And looking back on the books that I've enjoyed most over the last 6 months, they've been mystery books, and I just hadn't picked up on that until this moment. These books are super interesting in the way they're written as well. We get scenes from the main character, but we also get scenes from the villain, and you get just enough to realize what his plans are, and then you stop getting scenes from him, and then it's all up to the detective to try and figure out where he's going and what he's doing. And that is such a risky move, I feel like, because you're watching somebody try to figure out information that you already know, and there's the chance that it could be like, wow, this guy's really stupid, they're not solving it, and it didn't come across like that at all to me. I was really satisfied with the pacing of it and how well the main character, how long it took them to figure things out, and then what they did with that information. That was done really well, and that surprised me. It was really masterfully done. I haven't heard a whole lot about Nelson DeMillie. I've heard a lot about John Grisham and Dan Brown and David Baldacci, but I haven't heard a lot about Nelson DeMillie, and it's a shame because I feel like it was really well crafted and there was a lot of thought put into it. A bigger issue with this novel is the amount of racial profiling going on. I had a really hard time dealing with that and looking past it. And it's specifically targeted towards those of Arab descent. They constantly refer to the Middle East as Sandland, and it's a very disparaging commentary on that. And there's also just a lot of Arabs who are seen in a really bad, terrible light, in a criminal light. They're all the subjects of investigation. There's 1 or 2 Arabs who are professors, but they spend their time trashing their homeland and their compatriots, and there's just not a lot to balance out the amount of crap that's getting thrown at anyone of Arab descent. That's really unsettling to me. It plays a little too easily into stereotypes. And I also want to say that I recognize that this is a book written around the time of 9/11 and after 9/11, and those of Arab descent did bomb, or not bomb, fly an airplane into the Twin Towers. But there are a lot of people who are of Arab descent in the United States and outside of the United States who vehemently disagreed with that terrorist action. And I know several Muslims, and I like a lot of Muslims, and I'm not a Muslim myself, but I want their faith and their culture to be as accurately depicted as possible, and these books didn't do that. So that is a huge drawback to me of these books, is the amount of racial profiling and the stereotypes that it just so easily plays into, and I wish that was different. That's honestly the reason why these books are a 3.5 instead of a 4.5 for me, because I really enjoyed them, but I did not enjoy the amount of inaccurate depictions of people that were given. So that was a bummer. These books are both adult detective novels, so they do contain adult content. So if your parents don't want you reading adult novels, or you don't want to read adult novels, these may not be the novels for you. Okay, 2 more. So we have Black Man in a White Coat by Dr. Damon Tweedy. or I think the way it's pronounced is Damien Tweedy, PhD. This is a memoir discussing the American health system and how bias, race, and viewpoint of doctors dramatically impacts the quality of medical care that you receive in America. He reviews 3 different areas specifically. So he reviews his study as a student to be a doctor, his days as an intern, but it's not an intern when you're a doctor. What is it? And then as a psychiatrist when he specialized. He considers a lot of problems about race from multiple different angles and all of the problems that solutions create. So I feel like he does a very well-rounded, very fair view of the healthcare system, which I really appreciated, that it wasn't just one-sided, easy solutions for a very complicated problem. This is a subject that I really honestly don't have a lot of knowledge about. Ironically enough, I picked this up because the University of Utah was doing a community read, and they were going to get together every Tuesday to discuss the book, and I totally read the book, and then I missed all 5 of the discussions. I don't know. I just, from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, I just had amnesia every day, and like, just missed it every week. I gave this book a 5 stars. I probably won't read it again, but I feel like the narrative and the way that he told the story was really well crafted. It was a highly politically charged subject. There we go. And I personally believe that part of my responsibility as a human being is to educate myself about problems that affect my fellow human beings. And this book was a good entry into that. I'm not going to say I'm anywhere near an expert on this subject, but it did make me aware of a lot of issues that I would not come across in my own life. I recognized that the default narrative for most of my life has been the story of white Americans. And so educating myself on the narratives of other people of different backgrounds, cultures, and races, for quote unquote, because we're all the human race, but skin color does dramatically change how you view the world and how the world impacts you, both. I think that's really important. So that's part of my education for myself, is to learn more about that. At some point I will come to a consensus on this, but right now I'm just gathering education, and this book was a really great entry point into that, but don't take my word for it. And last but not least, Twelfth Night by Shakespeare, again. So I've read Shakespeare twice now. That is not an accurate statement. I read Twelfth Night twice by Shakespeare, once in January, once in February. I also have finished taking the class on Twelfth Night from the Boulder, Colorado University. I audited the class, and I have loved digging into this play. Part of that is because I have spent a lot of time coming to understand what's actually being said in Shakespeare. We're just going to screw this up. That's great. I think that this is a play that I will continuously get new things out of every time I read it. Part of that is because the language, there's a little bit of a barrier for language. There's a lot of bit of a barrier for language. And so the more you dig into it, the more you understand, and then the more you're like, haha. I loved some of the themes that were dealt with in this book on the subject of bullying, the subject of how stupid love makes you act, mistaken identity. The one thing that I still am unclear on is, why is it that Shakespeare is considered the best playwright? And what makes him so popular and special? Because lots of people wrote plays at the same time as Shakespeare, and like even before that, but he is like, if you're going to read a play, it's him and Oscar Wilde. Like, those are the 2 playwrights that we talk the most about. And I still don't know why that's a thing. And I plan to dig into that, and I definitely plan to read more of Shakespeare. So stay tuned, because I'm going to find an answer to this. I want to know why Shakespeare is considered the best of the best. And once I get that figured out, I'll let you know. Anyway, that is the wrap-up of all the books that I finished in February. I don't know why that took so long. It's all wrapped up. And that's all I have to say. So I will talk to you all later, or in the comments down below.